Hello and welcome to Band Literature Reviews with Brandon Searles. Band Literature Reviews is a series that evaluates concert band music from the perspective of a small school director. This is episode 4, History, Magic, and Mountains. In today's show, I will discuss 3 pieces of concert band literature: Moscow, 1941, Abracadabra, and Yellow Mountains. I hope you enjoy this magically thematic episode. Hello everybody, it is great to be back with you guys again. Here in Washington State, we are getting into the first few days of spring. It's beautiful weather here, and this is one of my favorite times of year, not only for the weather outside, but for what my band is accomplishing at this point in time in the year. Another fun update that I have is I now have a student teacher that is working with me right now, and it's been quite the privilege to be helping her out with her journey through the music education program at the local college here, and has given me a lot more time and a lot more help with being able to manage the various tasks and whatnot that I have with my job. But enough about me and about what's going on here. Let's go ahead and get into the pieces that we're going to be talking about. The first piece that we're going to do is Moscow 1941 by Brian Balmages. I hope you guys enjoy. Once again, that was Moscow 1941 by Brian Balmages. This is a piece of music that is in concert G minor, 2 flats in the key signature. The genre or style is historical or thematic. It's considered grade level 2. It is about 4 minutes and 15 seconds long and 117 measures. The publisher is FJH Music Company Incorporated. It was published in the year 2006. And it has tempo markings of 70 beats per minute, 76 beats per minute, and 152 beats per minute. A little bit more about the composer and about the context of the piece. So, Brian Balmages is a current day composer. He's already made quite a name for himself with a lot of the pieces he's done, and I really like him because he has a lot of approachable stuff for younger groups. He's not just the elitist composer that programs all sorts of crazy stuff that's only approachable by college groups. He finds ways of making things sound really, really cool for younger players and gets them really, really excited about playing in band and playing such cool sounding pieces, as you could probably hear in this one. He also composes for orchestra and chamber groups, as well as band. Some of the other pieces by him are Winged Victory, which that is an amazing, amazing piece. If you ever have a chance to listen to it, I might review it sometime in the future, but I highly recommend in the meantime that you check that one out. He also has one called Thunderbolt Fanfare, and then one of his more recent one is called Stages. So, to talk a little bit more about the context of this piece, Moscow 1941 is a piece, as you can imagine, that takes place during World War II, if you're well versed in history. During this time, there is the German siege of Moscow in 1941, and this really captures the darkness of that particular part of history and that part of World War II. It really conceptualizes a lot of the historical context surrounding that, and I think Brian does a great job of that. Let's talk about the grade level first. I would say that the grade level listed on this is pretty accurate. It says grade level 2. There are definitely grade level 2 things in this for all the instruments involved. There are some instruments that there are an additional challenge for. I would consider especially the alto saxophone part a bit challenging, the trombone part a bit challenging, but definitely overall grade level 2 for the band overall. There are lots of great expressive challenges in this, and also some very fun technical stuff for pretty much every instrument involved. And there are a number of different tempos that are fairly challenging to transition between, with very little warning or very little preparation prior to the switch. Instrumentation in this piece, there are 2 of a lot of parts. For example, flute, clarinet, alto sax, trumpet, and trombone. There's a lot of effectual percussion. I would say if I were going to try and do this, we would probably have to have up to 7 percussionists, at a minimum 5, from looking at the percussion parts. Also, there is a separate baritone euphonium part, which is usually the mark of a more advanced piece of music. Instead of having one unified bass line between like the trombones, the baritones, euphoniums, tuba, bari sax, it's starting to get a little bit more diverse and separated out because of their unique roles. As far as the ranges and challenges of this piece are concerned, the first clarinets cross over the break, the seconds do not. So this would definitely be one of those approachable pieces. I usually seek out pieces like this when I have a clarinet section that has a confident player that can play over the break, but also having some of the younger, say, 6th graders in band. This makes it a lot easier to approach for mixed middle school groups such as mine. The trumpets go up to a high F on the top of the staff, but it's only sparingly. It's not a lot of sustained high notes, which is definitely good for the younger brass player's chops. There are some glisses in the horn part. That is usually something I see in more advanced literature, but it's something fun that is very characteristic of the French horn, and something that would get the French horns excited and motivated to say, practice that. My French horn player I have currently might or might not be able to pull that off. If you have a decent horn section, that should not be a problem. Lastly, there are some optional higher notes in the horn part that go up to a high D. There's nothing written over a high C otherwise, which once again reflects Brian Balmage's understanding of younger middle school groups and knowing to not score things up really high for the French horn players. As far as the rhythms in the percussion are concerned, there's not a lot of the normally standard percussion, as you can tell from the recording. For example, the two percussion instruments that I found a little bit rarer that I know I don't have in my inventory are the marimba and the bar chimes. Those would make it a big challenge to be able to adapt. You could technically play the marimba part on the xylophone, but it would be a completely different sound, and there might be some range challenges there as well, because xylophones are usually less octaves than even the smallest marimba, for example. The percussion parts are also very demanding. There are a lot of dynamic challenges, as well as a variety of different 16-note rhythms in the snare drum part especially. There are also, for the entire band, some very difficult syncopated and offbeat rhythms. You can also see that with the claves part, and your band would really need to have a good understanding of playing syncopation and being able to be rhythmically precise with that. Otherwise, there are a lot of fairly simple eighth note parts and nothing too rhythmically technical for the wind parts. So that particular part is approachable as far as like the technique and the dexterity is concerned. However, some of the ranges and some of the offbeat and syncopated patterns might make it a little more of a mental challenge for your group. Moving on to my overall recommendation. I would say probably approachable on this piece. I have some hesitations that I'll go into as far as my group is concerned, but if your group is a more advanced middle school grade level group, then they should be able to manage this no problem. That being said, I someday aspire to play this piece with a band of mine at the school I'm currently at someday. I feel like it's one of those pieces where it's not the pie in the sky, oh, I really, really wish and hope that we could play this, but probably not going to get to. This is one of the approachable ones that would be really, really enjoyable to work up to, and maybe at a time where we have a longer concert cycle might be able to approach this. And maybe that'll be the case for you as well. The keys to success on this piece of music is you would probably need to have about a 25-piece band minimum. And I know some small schools would not have that many students, and I know in my extremely small school, I don't have that many. Right now I have 18 in band, which is close to that, but not quite the right instrumentation, and I definitely don't have just the number of bodies that would be necessary to fill out the sound of this. So once again, something that I aspire to later on in my career, because this is a really good quality piece of middle school band music that's not watered down and sounds authentic. Besides that, you're going to need to have an unusually advanced and mature percussion section, I would say. The biggest thing is like the range of dynamics that the percussionists have to adapt to. There are lots of piano, pianissimo in the snare drum parts. There's a lot of effectual stuff that is very subjective to be able to get right. And once again, it requires a great variety of percussion instruments that are not always what are programmed for middle school groups. Another key to success is having a low brass that knows how to play the melody. The trombones, if they're confident, solid trombone players, will love this part. If they're not confident and solid on playing melody, they're going to have a really, really rough time with this, I think. Besides that, You need to have 1 or 2 clarinet players in your band that can cross the break confidently, because there are some really important lines that the clarinets have that just wouldn't sound the same if you, say, took it down an octave to try and adapt it. You would need it to have at least 1 or 2 clarinet players that are confident across the break into the clarion range. And lastly, as I mentioned before, you're going to have the correct percussion instruments. There's really no substituting the bar chimes or the marimba, and those are very unique and characteristic sounding instruments that would make or break the piece. I know there are a lot of younger middle school pieces that say like the bar chimes are optional and are not necessary, and I'm playing a piece right now with my band that has a bar chime part, but it says it's optional. Someday I hope to have that instrument, but it's not always a given, especially with small schools like mine. So once again, that was Moscow, 1941. I hope you guys enjoyed that piece. I definitely did. And once again, a great quality piece of middle school literature. Next, let's move over to Abracadabra by Frank Ticheli. That was, once again, Abracadabra by Frank Ticheli. First, a few notes about the composer and about this piece. Number one, I really enjoy listening to Frank Ticheli's music. I played a lot of his stuff, including this one. This is a piece that, dating myself here, actually came out right around the time I was in high school, and I got to play the first clarinet part on this, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this piece of music. This is, once again, a favorite composer of mine and a favorite piece of his that I've gotten to play in my career. So, with that being said, here are some details about the piece. Like I said before, this is Abracadabra by Frank Ticheli. The key signature is G minor with 2 flats in the key signature. Once again, we have a thematic genre or style. This is considered grade level 3. It is 5 minutes long, almost exactly, and 156 measures, which is definitely on the longer side, just measures-wise. The publisher is Manhattan Beach Music. It was published in the year 2005. And there are a variety of tempos in here of 138 beats per minute, 84 beats per minute, and 168 beats per minute. Here are a few more details about the piece and about Frank Ticheli. Frank Ticheli is a current-day American composer. He wrote this particular song to capture aspects of innocent mischievousness and the magic of childhood. He was inspired to write this piece because of his son growing up and just seeing some of the youthful innocence and the enjoyment of being a kid, and obviously captured that picture really well with this piece. Some of his other notable compositions are Cajun folk songs. I really enjoy that one. I got to play that last summer at ABC. Angels in the Architecture, and then lastly, one of his most famous pieces is Blue Shades, which, not gonna lie, I'm hoping that I end up getting to play this summer at ABC because he is going to be there this summer, which is very exciting that I finally get to meet him in person, which I never thought I would get to do. Enough of the fanboying by me. Let's go ahead and get into some of the details of the piece. As far as this grade level is concerned, I would say it is pretty accurate overall. There are some tough rhythms, a lot of tempo changes, and a lot of characteristic sounds and techniques needed for every single instrument in the band that this is scored for. As far as the instrumentation is concerned, there are lots of parts on each instrument. A lot of them are 3-part, so 3 clarinets, 3 trumpets. There are 2 horn parts, 2 trombone parts. There's a separate piccolo part, a separate euphonium part, and there are 2 oboe parts. There are even some extra, almost exotic instrument parts, such as a contrabass clarinet. Some of the percussion instruments are a little bit out of the norm as well. The percussion parts, speaking of which, there are 4 separate percussion parts, so 4, 5, 6 percussionists should be able to manage this piece well. Other than that, pretty straightforward instrumentation. The ranges and challenges in this piece are not all that demanding overall. Out of the clarinet parts, the first and the second clarinets cross the break, the third does not. The trumpets end up getting to a high G above the staff a number of times. I wouldn't say frequently, but it's not sparingly either. The horn parts are fairly manageably written. I think the highest note in the horn part is going up to a D, so definitely requiring some confidence on the higher notes. And this is one thing I learned from my student teacher that I mentioned before. Having a double horn as opposed to a single F horn will definitely help the French horn players be able to manage hitting some of these higher notes. The last challenge is having trombone players that are agile with their slides. The range isn't too demanding, just up to some high Ds, maybe high E flats in there, but nothing too crazy for the trombones, like I said. As far as rhythms are concerned and percussion parts in this piece, there are lots of running 16th notes in the woodwinds, so pretty characteristic, typical high school band literature for the woodwinds. There are lots of very exposed low brass rhythms, such as a bunch of staccato eighth notes in a row, and that definitely makes it a challenge, especially for trombone players, but a number of other low brass instruments as well. The percussion part is not all that demanding, though. This definitely is an effectual one, but it's not nearly as demanding as, say, Moscow 1941. So the percussion get a little bit of a break on this piece, but it's not boring at the same time, which is good. For my overall recommendation, I would say probably not for a small school. There are just too many necessary and unique wind instruments, and it's fairly challenging for all parts and requires a high school level player on each instrument. And I personally believe that it would be pretty frustrating for a middle school player that's playing at a typical middle school level to approach this and have any success with it. As far as keys to success are concerned, though, you're going to have a lot of these niche instrument players. There are multiple double reed parts, bassoon 1, bassoon 2, oboe 1, oboe 2. You're going to want to have the contrabass clarinet, but obviously not required. And of course, having a separate piccolo part presents some challenges as well. Another key to success is brass players that have a good command of hitting the different partials. They have a lot of demands, a lot of challenges in tempo as well as expressiveness. The nuance of this piece also is quite considerable. There's a lot of from niente or decrescendoing to niente in these parts, and that nuance is going to be really hard to achieve for beginning middle school players. You will also want to have a number of your clarinet players that can cross the break very, very confidently and often, and you're going to want to have a larger band for this. I would say at least 30 for the minimal instrumentation. This is probably one of those bigger band required pieces. When I performed this, we had like 40 to 50 people in band, I want to say. That was like the perfect size when I was in high school. Once again, this is Abracadabra by Frank Ticheli. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Our last piece for today is Yellow Mountains by Jacob de Haan. Let's go ahead and listen to it and have some remarks on it afterwards. Thank you for listening to Yellow Mountains by Jacob de Haan. This piece of music is in the key signature of F major and A flat major, which are respectively 1 flat and 4 flats in the key signature. Once again, the genre and style is thematic, which, if you can see a theme to what I'm doing here, that was definitely on purpose. It's considered a grade level 2.5 piece. It is 3 minutes and 20 seconds long, 56 measures. The publisher is De Haan Publications. It was published in the year 1997, and the tempo, with some fluctuations, is 76 beats per minute. Here's a little bit about the composer, Jacob de Haan. He is a Dutch composer, and a lot of his music is mainly available over in Europe. However, it's a little bit easier to be able to obtain this music because of the partnership that Hal Leonard has in both Europe and the United States. You can expect a little bit of extra shipping time for this piece and maybe a little bit of an extra shipping charge, but they are able to get it from one subdivision of their company to this one over here. The piece Yellow Mountains was composed in response to a trip that Jacob de Haan took to Switzerland and was up in the mountains, and immediately this theme came to him as he was sitting gazing out at the beauty of the mountains surrounding him. As you can tell in the piece of music, it's a really, really beautiful, flowing, gentle, but majestic at the same time piece. And once again, being thematic pieces of music, they really capture the idea that they're trying to convey really, really well. These are some very, very solid sounding compositions by these really, really absolutely phenomenal composers. Moving on to the grade level of the piece. The stated grade level is a 2.5. And I would say that that's a little bit rated on the lower end of the spectrum. I feel like a 3 or even a 3.5 might be more appropriate in some cases, especially for the French horn parts. Yeah, very, very, very challenging for the French horn, but also very beautiful as well. The other part that makes me think it should be a higher grade level is because the expressive aspect of playing is pretty demanding as well for all the instrumentalists involved in this. The instrumentation of this piece has a lot of 3-part for a lot of the instruments, which includes clarinet, trumpet, French horn, and trombone. All of these have 3 parts for each one, which makes it a little hard to find the adequate instrumentation to make this sound good. They also have an oboe part that's hugely important. It's basically an oboe solo. It's not written solo in the part, but it might as well be a solo with how open and exposed it is. So if you don't have an oboe, you're going to be missing some of the sound of this piece. The baritone part, however, is doubled by the tenor sax, or at least the first baritone part is. If you don't have a confident baritone player, you can have that easily covered by the tenor sax and vice versa. In a pinch, that would end up working in the same way because they, like I said, double each other's part and produce a really, really beautiful sound between the two of them in the recording. Lastly, there are 5 percussion parts. This is nothing out of the norm. This is pretty standard, straightforward concert band percussion writing. As far as the ranges and challenges are concerned, all of the clarinet parts, all 3, cross the break. The trumpets go up to a high F at the top of the staff, and they do this multiple times. Not frequently, but once again, not sparingly either. The horns, as I said before, are all over the place. The horn parts are very difficult, very flowing, a lot of technical demand, a lot of demand on the chops. This is a French horn feature piece. This is like John Williams writing movie scores with a bunch of very prominent French horn parts. Jacob de Haan did the exact same thing here with this particular composition. And if you don't have 3 good horn players, I would say your band has no business playing this piece, because otherwise it's not going to sound right. The actual highest note in the horn part is an E flat at the top of the staff, and they are getting up there very regularly. The first part is getting down pretty low as well. So the French horns are playing in pretty close to a 2-octave range, which is definitely a lot to ask a middle school French horn section at all. You'd have to have very uncommonly good French horn players, like I said before. The baritones and euphoniums have a pretty tough part as well. There's lots of moving eighth notes, but once again, with the tenor sax, that would definitely help fill that out. Another reason that this is challenging is there's lots of rubato, a lot of interpretation on the musicians' parts. Your musicians are going to need to have more experience with playing expressively. This should definitely not be something that you try to do with a group that hasn't done as much expressive playing. Otherwise, it's going to be, I think, a little too much of a challenge to be able to work up and do this piece justice. As far as the time signature is concerned, that is the one thing that's not super complicated. It's just 4/4 time the entire way through and consistent tempo all the way through, besides the rubato. So that part at least makes it a little easier. However, there are a lot of other things that make it even harder. And then lastly, there is the entire dynamic range from pianissimo all the way up to fortissimo. It's important for your musicians to have those various levels of dynamics and be able to differentiate and have a characteristic tone on their instrument at all those dynamic levels. As far as the rhythms and percussion are concerned, there's lots of smooth articulations in the wind parts. There are lots of 16th notes, like sets of 2 16th notes on the and of the beat, that are going to be really tough to place, especially at a slow tempo. If your students are used to playing like fast 16th notes, they're going to find this a little bit challenging to slow them down to fit in the gap between the beats on the and to be able to play precisely. And this is in a lot of parts: French horns, clarinets, flutes, saxophones, trumpets even. This would make it rhythmically challenging to be able to line up because it happens so often. Lastly, the percussion parts are not overly difficult. There are some 16th notes and not a lot of syncopation or driving rhythms of any kind. Fairly straightforward. Once again, effectual percussion part, but not demanding in that sense. As far as my overall recommendation is concerned, definitely hesitant. I'm going to say definitely no for my group and for the foreseeable future. However, if you have the correct instrumentation and you have a mature horn section that's really gunning for a fun piece to play, this would definitely be the one to go with. That being said, here are the keys to success. Number one, you're going to need to have a decent sized group, as I mentioned before. At least 20 to 25 students, if not more. I would say that most of the parts need to have an average playing level of 7th, 8th grade, that upper middle school, early high school grade level capability. You'll also need to have a group that is super confident playing with lyrical and smooth melodies and counter melodies, and just having a lot of understanding of how the parts flow together, because otherwise it's going to be a challenge to know where the melody or counter melody is going and being able to balance to that, which is a challenge for any group, but obviously you're going to want them to have at least a grasp on how to do that prior to this. As far as instrumentation, the must-have instruments, you need to have an oboe, period. Otherwise this piece does not sound right. You need to have either a tenor sax or baritone, or both. And you need to have a decent number of clarinets and trumpets to be able to carry some of these really important melody parts and very important herald trumpet parts. There are a few moments where the trumpets are having this 16th note, dotted quarter note rhythm that's really, really important and really transitions to the next section. To make it sound authentic, to make it sound what it's meant to sound like, you're definitely going to need to have a decent number beyond just one on a part with the clarinets and trumpets specifically. And lastly, to find success with this, all your clarinet players need to know how to cross the break and be able to do so proficiently. Like I said, all the parts cross the break several times and you can't really get away with not doing so. I really enjoyed listening to Yellow Mountains. Wonderful, wonderful piece, and hopefully gives you a picture of whether or not you'll be able to play it with your group. Thank you again for joining me for BandLitReviews. I appreciate your support in my channel and in watching my videos. if you want to contact me directly, or you can email me at bandlitreviews@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening. Have a great time with your bands out there, and I will see you in the next episode.